Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a company that's been making waves in the AI world.
Yeah,
BigBear.ai, ticker symbol BBAI.
it's been pretty interesting to follow.
You've probably seen it. The stock's been going kind of crazy up and down like a yo-yo.
It has.
And a lot of people are wondering, is this, the real deal or is it just hype?
Right.
Well, we've done some digging and we're going to break it all down for you.
So one thing that's really fascinating is how BigBear.ai's wild ride kind of started with that whole chat GPT explosion back in 2023.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was suddenly, an AI guru.
It was like AI was the only thing anyone was talking about.
Yeah, and that frenzy kind of spilled over into the stock market, and BigBear.ai rode that wave.
And they rode it high. I mean, their stock shot up 59% in 2024 alone.
Yeah, and by New Year's Eve, it was up a crazy 128% from the year before.
Incredible. But then things got a little rocky, right?
Yeah, exactly. You see these huge jumps followed by some pretty steep drops.
Like that one day, October 15th, 2024.
Oh, yeah.
The stock just nosedived.
It plummeted over 8%, closed at $1.75.
So, yeah, definitely a roller coaster for investors.
For sure.
But that kind of volatility, it's not super unusual for a newer company.
No, especially in a hot sector like AI.
But what's interesting is that even with all the ups and downs, BigBear.ai is actually showing some serious growth.
They are.
They even landed a massive contract with the U.S. Army.
That's right, a 5-year deal worth $165 million to help the Army become, more data-driven.
Wow.
That's not small potatoes.
No.
And it really shows that BigBear.ai isn't just playing around with algorithms. They're applying their tech to, real-world situations.
That's what I find so exciting about them. They're not just riding the AI hype. They're actually getting these huge contracts. They're actually implementing their solutions.
Exactly.
But, we got to look past the headlines and dig into the financials too, right?
Oh, absolutely. While everyone was celebrating those crazy high stock prices in 2023, their projected revenue growth for that year was only about 10% compared to 2022.
That's interesting.
So it does raise the question, is this growth sustainable?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And then there's their last earnings report, which didn't exactly have investors throwing parties.
No, not quite. Their stock took an 11% hit because even though they met earnings expectations, they missed their revenue projections.
So there's this disconnect between how the stock is performing and the actual revenue coming in.
Yeah, and that's something investors are definitely watching closely.
So on one hand, you have this story of a company, winning these big government contracts, pushing the boundaries of AI.
Yeah.
But then you have these revenue numbers that are making some people a little nervous.
And it's super important to remember that BigBear.ai isn't operating in a bubble. What happens in the broader business, intelligence, and AI landscape can really affect them.
Right, like how companies like Palantir are doing.
Exactly. Palantir, big player in data analytics.
If Palantir's doing well, investors might feel more confident about the whole sector.
Which could benefit BigBear.ai, but the opposite is also true.
Right, so things can get kind of complicated.
It's true. It's almost like predicting the weather,
So many factors involved.
There are.
And then you've got these mixed signals from the analysts.
Oh, tell me about it.
Some analysts are super bullish on BigBear.ai.
Oh, yeah.
Predicting that the share price could skyrocket by like 185%.
Crazy.
And then others are much more cautious.
Yeah, suggesting the stock is probably fairly valued right now.
It's like they're looking at two totally different companies.
Well, before we dive into what all this means for you, the listener, and your investment decisions, let's take a closer look at some of BigBear.ai's specific projects and partnerships.
Yeah, because they're making a name for themselves with this government work, but they're not limiting themselves to just defense contracts, and this is where things get really interesting.
Right. They're branching out into areas like biometric verification technology.
Like at Denver International Airport.
Exactly. And they've got a partnership with Heathrow Airport in London.
So their AI is moving out of the lab and into our everyday lives. And I love that they're diversifying their portfolio, showing they're not just a one-trick pony.
Exactly. That diversification can make an investment less risky. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Right.
But, it's still important to remember that BigBear.ai is considered a small cap stock.
Right.
So there's huge potential for growth, but also more risk.
Right. And they have a pipeline worth $130 million.
Yeah.
Which suggests they're really just getting started.
They are.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Let's not.
There are still some yellow flags to consider.
Definitely. Their market cap is currently at $1.14 billion with revenue of $155 million.
Okay.
Those are decent numbers, but then you dig a little deeper and see they're still operating at an adjusted net loss of $57.5 million.
Okay, so they're pushing for growth,
They are.
but they're not profitable yet.
Not yet.
And that's key information for anyone thinking about investing in BigBear.ai.
It is. And to kind of add to that, BigBear.ai actually secured $21.9 million recently by exercising a warrant.
Okay, so for those of us who don't speak fluent Wall Street, what does that even mean?
Well, think of a warrant like a special ticket that lets someone buy stock at a certain price in the future.
Okay.
So whoever exercised this warrant is basically betting that BigBear.ai stock is going to be worth more than $9 a share by August 2025.
So they're pretty confident.
It's a pretty strong vote of confidence, yeah.
But like you said earlier, there's a lot of things that can happen.
There are.
As of February 10th, 2025, the stock price is hovering around $8.80.
Right.
So it's getting close to that $9 mark. But what about the technical indicators? What are they saying? Buy, sell, hold.
Well, most of them are pointing towards a buy. However, the Relative Strength Index, or RSI, is sitting a little high at 72.98.
Okay, so break that down for me. What does a high RSI tell us?
Basically, an RSI over 70 suggests that the stock might be overbought, meaning it could be due for a correction, kind of like stretching a rubber band too far. It's probably going to snap back.
Right.
But it's not a foolproof indicator.
So a little bit of a warning sign, but not a reason to freak out.
Exactly.
What about the overall stock price forecast? What are the analysts saying about where BigBear.ai is headed in the next year?
Well, that's where things get a little interesting. The 12-month stock price forecast is $4.50.
Wait, really? That's a pretty big drop from where it is now.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got these technical indicators saying buy, but then you have a price forecast that's predicting almost a 50% decrease.
It's true.
It seems like no one can agree on this company.
Well, it just goes to show that investing in a company like BigBear.ai is not a simple yes or no decision. There's potential for growth, but also significant risk involved.
Right, and that's why it's so important to do your research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can give you the info, the analysis, but ultimately the decision of whether to buy, hold, or sell BigBear.ai is up to you, the listener.
You got to consider your own investment goals, your risk tolerance, and do your own homework.
Exactly. And speaking of research, it's important to look beyond just the numbers. Think about the big picture. How is the overall AI market evolving? What are BigBear.ai's competitors doing? What are their strengths, their weaknesses? These are all critical questions to ask.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day stock movements and forget to zoom out.
It is.
Look at the big picture, so let's do that now.
Yeah.
What are some of the big trends that are happening in the AI world that could impact BigBear.ai?
Well, one major trend is this increasing adoption of AI by businesses across all industries.
Yeah, I'm seeing that everywhere.
It is everywhere. From healthcare to finance to retail, companies are realizing how powerful AI can be.
To automate things, improve efficiency, get insights from data.
Exactly. This is a huge opportunity for companies like BigBear.ai.
But it also means more competition, right?
Absolutely. More and more companies are jumping on the AI bandwagon.
So BigBear.ai needs to stay ahead of the game.
They do. They got to keep innovating to stay competitive.
So even though the AI market is growing, it's also getting more crowded.
Yeah. So BigBear.ai can't afford to just sit back and relax.
Right. They got to keep pushing the boundaries and show that they have something unique to offer.
Exactly. And that brings us back to their work with the U.S. Army. That contract is about more than just revenue.
Yeah.
It's about establishing BigBear.ai as a leader in AI for national security. That kind of credibility can really set them apart.
I see your point. That contract sends a signal to investors and customers.
It does.
That BigBear.ai is serious about AI. But I'm also curious about those other ventures, like the biometric technology at airports.
Yeah.
How big of a deal are those projects for their overall growth?
They're actually pretty significant. By branching out into new markets like transportation and security, BigBear.ai is becoming less reliant on government contracts.
Yeah, I was reading about their work at Denver International Airport. They're using facial recognition to make things easier for passengers.
Yeah, it sounds super futuristic.
It does. But how reliable and secure is that technology?
That's a great question. Any tech that involves personal data, especially biometric data, has to be handled carefully.
Yeah, for sure.
BigBear.ai is going to have to prove that their technology is accurate, secure, and respects people's privacy if they want the public to trust them.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk for them.
It is.
They have to innovate to stay ahead, but they also have to be careful about the ethical side of things.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, and that's why it's so crucial for investors to look beyond the hype and really try to understand the company.
Not just the technology, but the potential impact on society.
It's not just about making money. It's about investing in companies that align with your values, that are trying to make things better.
That's a great point.
And that brings us back to BigBear.ai, a company with a lot of potential.
But also a lot of question marks.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener?
What does it mean for someone trying to decide whether to invest in BigBear.ai?
Well, we've given you a lot to think about today. We've looked at the company's history, their financials, their projects, their potential, and the risks.
Right. And now it's up to you.
Do your due diligence and make an informed decision.
We always say this, but it's really important to remember, never invest based solely on what you hear on a podcast.
Definitely not financial advice, just two people chatting about a company that we find interesting.
Right. We're just giving you information and our perspective.
Exactly, but you're the one who has to make the final decision.
You have to decide if BigBear.ai is the right investment for you.
Use this as a starting point for your own research.
Dig into those financial reports.
Read what other analysts are saying.
See if BigBear.ai fits into your overall investment strategy.
And remember, investing is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, don't get caught up in the hype or panic over short-term changes.
Focus on the long game, the long-term potential.
Do you believe in their vision? Do you think they can execute? Those are the questions to ask yourself.
And if you're still on the fence about BigBear.ai after listening to us for, the past hour, that's okay.
It's a complex company.
It is. There's no shame in taking a wait-and-see approach.
Sometimes the best investment is the one you don't make.
That's true. So what are your final thoughts? Is this a company you'd put your money in?
Yeah, would you invest?
Honestly, I'm still not sure. They have a lot going for them. The technology, the government contracts, their presence in those key markets.
Right.
But those revenue numbers and how much the stock jumps around, it makes me hesitate.
Yeah, I get that.
I'd want to see more consistent results, a clearer path to profitability.
Before you felt comfortable.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, intrigued by the potential, but also a little cautious.
Me too.
I'll be watching them closely to see what happens over the next few quarters.
Sounds like a plan. Investing should be exciting.
It should.
But it should also be informed.
Always. So do your research, stay informed, and invest wisely.
Great advice. So to wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you want listeners to remember about BigBear.ai?
It's a company with a lot of potential, but also a lot of risk. It's not a guaranteed win, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Well, that's all the time we have for today on Investing Talk Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this look at BigBear.ai.
And as always, do your own research.
Come to your own conclusions.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah, just a starting point. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
And if you enjoyed this one, share it with a friend who's also into investing.
And let us know what you think about BigBear.ai. Is it a buy, hold, or sell? Leave a comment. Let's keep the conversation going.
Until next time, happy investing.
Happy investing.